to get together again for more information about new tech, or as our next speaker is saying, working outside the system. Thank you for your quiet. So, it is my great pleasure to introduce Tan. Always surprises me to hear philosophers get in the act. Tan is with the Horizon Foundation, which is also called in Dutch the Ender. Okay, Tan, you're on.
By the way, although the discussant is announced, the discussant won't be here, so it will be all questions and answers.
I'll arrange that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, anybody is planning to leave the room, would you do that now? Because it's rather disturbing to leave the room during any presentation, okay? Well, thank you for coming. It's good to see that you're not dead yet. It's a pleasure to be here as a representative or delegate of probably the world's smallest but no less effective right to die society, the Horizon. I hope you will excuse me for not giving you the story of my life. I am a philosopher in the empirical and sceptical tradition of David Hume, the Scottish philosopher. And I work as an end-of-life counselor with the Horizon. I do this work in close collaboration with 6 colleagues and supported by the board of the Horizon. Maybe it may be of interest to know, that's your last chance. I did my best. Maybe it's of interest to know that I have been prosecuted in 2005 for giving assistance with suicide, and I was acquitted in 2007. In 2013, December, I was interrogated again by the police on the same but different charges, and again in 2014, January. I'm just saying this so that you know the criminal mind that you are listening to. I do hope my English will be good enough for you to get the gist of what I want to say, but on the other hand, I trust my English will be better than your Dutch. For convenience sake, my talk will be presented with a few visual presentations, but that concerns only definitions, nothing moving, so to speak. These definitions I give on slides, otherwise it would be difficult for you to memorize them. As indicated, I will focus on working outside the system in the Netherlands. Now, first of all, you should know that in the Netherlands we have a system for everything, even a system for working outside the system. So I will present first some details of a theoretical nature, but of course dying is not a theoretical matter, so I will next present cases that I have been directly involved with, and that will illustrate the work of an end-of-life counselor. After that, I will try to bring both lines, theory and practice, together again. So 2 clarifications are needed to begin with. What is this system, and what is this system outside the system? Well, the system, the primary system, refers to what is known as the euthanasia law. I will have to say a few words about it, but I won't repeat what Peter de Jong has been saying on another occasion, of course. And second, the system outside the system does not exist in conflict with this first system. It's an addition to it. It's a supplement or complement. In the present company, my country will probably be best known because of its law on euthanasia. Curiously enough, this law isn't about euthanasia at all. In the total body of the text, the word euthanasia isn't mentioned even once. So you might want to know, what is this law about? Well, it states the requirements that have to be met by the physician, not by the patient, by the physician, who wants to respond positively to his patient, requesting the physician either to end the patient's life or to assist the patient in ending his life. And all this, and this is very important, all this is done under the final supervision and ultimate responsibility of the physician. In several thousands of cases a year, the physician does in fact respond positively. Almost always the physician ends the patient's life by administering lethal drugs. Only in a very small number of cases does the physician end the patient's life by assisting with the patient's suicide. The end-of-life clinic tries to change these figures. In all these cases, it is tacitly assumed that when this happens, the patient dies a good death, or a thanatos. This is assumed. It is not investigated, and since recently we know for certain that it's not always the case. On occasion, we now know that the patient dies a bad death. Nevertheless, even in those cases, the legal requirements of due care are met by the physician, at least according to the review committees. The review committees do not assess whether the patient died a good death. This slide gives you some information. So actually we ought not to refer to the euthanasia law, but to the termination of life law. The word euthanasia doesn't appear in the law. However, the habit of speaking in terms of euthanasia law is ineradicable. This euthanasia is what I will refer to as physician's euthanasia. This is the form of euthanasia that represents the system. In the Netherlands, euthanasia was originally and officially defined in 1984 as the deliberate termination of the life of a person on his request by another person. And that should be on slide 3. Needless to say, this definition is seriously at fault, covering far too much. In fact, covering every case of one person deliberately ending the life of another person at his request. However, this can be easily remedied, as I did by defining physician's euthanasia as the deliberate termination of the life of a person on his request by another person in accordance with the demands of the termination of life law. This is a formal definition of physician's euthanasia. But we have to go outside the system, of course. In the years after the Dutch euthanasia law became operative, it also became clear that there was ample space outside of this system. This space is covered by the notion of self-euthanasia. This notion was reintroduced in the debate by Bauduin and Chabot, and it has a somewhat longer history, but that predates the current debate. In my writings, I have defined this self-euthanasia as the deliberate termination of his or her own life by the person himself, under his own control, after clear and careful consideration and carried out with due care. It should be on number 4. Of course, looking at my definition, I am obliged to do what the Dutch euthanasia law does not do. And that is stipulate what I mean by a good death. I will do so next, and I will also indicate where the differences lie between a good death of a person by the hands of the physician and a good death of a person by his own hands. Then we go to another slide. And so, this is my definition of a good death, and you're invited to shoot at it after I'm finished. Not at me, but at the definition. A good death. In sum, a good death means a death decided to after clear and careful consideration. It's a death in which the individual's role is as large as possible. It's a death that is carried out with the utmost care, that is not executed in forced loneliness. It may be in loneliness, but it ought to be not in forced loneliness. If at all possible, in contact with loved ones, without adding pain or suffering, and considered, given the circumstances of course, as dignified and accepted by the individual in peace and quiet. obviously, at least I would say, these conditions will not be met in every case to the same extent. So this makes this good death an ideal that you might strive for. This good death, or euthanatos, is what is looked for in both physician's euthanasia and self-euthanasia. In both cases, death is self-requested by the individual. It is not requested by the physician, not by the patient's family or anyone else, of course. However, and then I'm going to the next slide, I can return to this one later if you want. Only self-euthanasia is also self-performed and self-determined. Self-requested refers to the individual himself requesting an end to his life. Self-performed refers to the individual himself self-performed refers to the individual himself carrying out the act. And self-determined refers to the individual having the decisive voice. Self-euthanasia is distinguished from physician's euthanasia by these last two qualities, being also self-performed and self-determined. So now, by way of goodbye to the theoretical part of my contribution, I will define also self-determination, or autonomy, if you like. I have to go to the next slide. Is that correct? Yes, that's number 9. This self-determination is in this context, that is in the context of self-euthanasia, it's defined as the attaining and keeping of control and authority over the process of preparing, deciding, and bringing about the termination of one's own life with due care and concern. In order to exert this self-determination, the individual must be mentally competent to do so. And he or she must also be physically competent to do so, though in the current circumstances in the Netherlands, relatives or intimate friends may contribute within certain limits. Okay, well, there's a lot more to discuss as to theory, but I will now turn to some examples of self-euthanasia in which I have been involved as counselor. I will confine myself to the use of lethal medication. I leave out the voluntary refusal of food and drink, as this is attended to by the physician, nurses and family. I will also leave out the helium method, as this is taken to only rarely in the Netherlands. My first case will be the case of Anton, who was a marine biologist of international standing. We met when he was 86 and he died at 86. He approached me as counselor because his physical problems had reached a level he no longer wanted to tolerate. He had a good relationship with his physician, but he loathed the idea of not being his own man in this most vital decision. His physical problems centered around his backbone or spine for many years now. He had led an eventful, fruitful and rewarding life. A life he could easily consider as being completed. He had nothing much to add and he saw no problem whatsoever in saying his goodbye. He only wanted to do this with the utmost care. He had remained a bachelor all his life, but his work and travels had brought him some good friends worldwide. He kept in touch with them, but he informed them that recently that at some point in the near future this contact might fail, and if so, they ought not to worry, he said. He was grateful for their friendship over years. But all things on earth must come to an end. Surely a biologist should be aware of that. It's very much an exception for me, but when he asked me if I were prepared to be present, to sit next to him in his last moment, I agreed after having given the request some thought. This lethal medication consisted of 1.2 grams of oxycodone. There was a question about that previously, taken together with 120 milligrams of flunitrazepam. which he obtained through a reliable Dutch source I could inform him about. He had carefully taken his antiemetic in the preceding 24 hours. He left several envelopes with information for his physician, the coroner, the notary, and other relevant persons. As he donated his remains to science, measures were taken in that respect as well. After ingesting his medication, sitting upright in bed, he next laid down. We talked a bit for just about a few minutes, but his speech was becoming slurry in about 7 minutes. He slipped into a deepening sleep, and as far as I could tell, I'm not a physician, but as far as I could tell, he died within 40 minutes. I then left as agreed. Measures had been taken for the physician to find him in time. The next case I will briefly refer to was Carol. Carol was well over 50 when she contacted me. Her history of psychiatric problems and treatment covered a period of over 30 years. She lived alone, no children, no partner, no real friends. Her parents had died, and she wasn't an easy person to make contact. And in fact, the necessity of visiting me caused her some serious sleepless nights. She first informed me extensively in writing about her condition and its history. And at the end she wrote, "Some people consider their lives being over and completed when they're 80. I am well over 50, but I do consider my life as being completed and over. And I would want to be able to end it on my own terms, dignified, well prepared, without causing pain or trouble to anyone, not to myself and not to anyone else." And so she did, 6 months later, using 2 bottles of Nembutal obtained from a well-known address in Mexico I informed her about. A few days before the event, she informed me of the date she had set for herself, and we said our goodbye. Next is the case of Thomas. Thomas was 83 when we met, and he was suffering from the onset of dementia, a problem that is threatening for a lot of us. It was an illness he had seen progressing in both his parents for years. And already a long time ago, he therefore decided that should he be diagnosed with the same disease, he would put an end to his life in time on his own conditions. This was his reason for contacting me. Other than Anton and Carol, Thomas had a wife who supported him, children who did the same. In fact, I was first contacted by one of his children. And he had a number of grandchildren who were also aware of the state their grandfather was in and the plans he had made for himself. In this respect, Thomas was well off. Actually, more his physician, who felt he could not answer the terms for physicians' euthanasia, nevertheless continued to give his support to Thomas and his family. He, that is the physician, contacted me as counselor because he wanted to assure himself of the reliability of the process, including the medication Thomas was going to use. This medication was the same as Anton had been using, oxycodone plus flunitrazepam, obtained from the same source, though the road to contacting this source changes at random for reasons of safety. And there is more. This is probably the Netherlands at their best. The local pastor, obviously of a free-thinking kind, was also aware of what was going to happen, and he offered his spiritual support to the family. So the evening before Thomas was going to take his lethal dose of medication, the pastor held an intimate service at their home. Present were Thomas, his wife, their children and grandchildren, to celebrate Thomas's life. Next morning, surrounded by his family, he said his final goodbye. At the beginning of this year, the family published a small booklet telling the story of the self-euthanasia of their beloved Thomas. They openly told their story, including the contributions by the physician, the pastor, and the counselor, who were all mentioned by their real names. The story of Thomas is very similar in respect to the story of another client of mine, Jan Ru. Baudouin tried to show something of his video, and the widow of Jan Ru appears in this video. That was his wife, Nell, who appears in the film Eyewitnesses. Jan Ru also ended his life by taking liquid pentobarbital, as did Carol. I could tell you other stories I wrote about, also about elderly couples. They were an issue in these meetings too. Elderly. These days, I already spoke about that, I was informed about, by the children of an elderly couple. They had peacefully died together in their own home, with their children present, that's important. She was 83, he was 84, and he had recently been forced to move to a nursing home, much to his annoyance and to her great pain. The family brought father home for the weekend, which turned out, as carefully planned, to be the couple's last weekend. And they ended their lives together using pentobarbital powder, 12.5 grams each, obtained from a well-known address in China, the short one. So, all in all, I suppose by now you get the picture of this so-called system outside the system, illustrated by the use of lethal medication. There is some information on my next slide about these medications. Now, in conclusion, I would like to try to bring together the bit of theory and practice I presented to you. As stated, the notion of self-euthanasia is a normative one. It isn't just self-thanasia, it is self-euthanasia. It says here another slide. Okay. We noticed this good death before as an ideal you might strive for, so we have to ask how far this ideal has been realized in the examples I gave to you. How about Anton, Carol, Thomas, Jan Ru, and the couples I referred to? Did they die a good death? And what problems did they face and had to conquer? And what about their families and loved ones? Looking at my definition of a good death, I think I can say that given the possibilities and limitations of each case, that death was indeed a good death. Maybe Carol, who died as she lived in loneliness, had deserved some final company, but this was her choice, and it fitted the way she had lived. Anton also died the way he had lived, and there is no doubt that he was at peace with it. Thomas, and also Jan Ru, you might see on the DVD Baldwin made, Thomas, I am tempted to say, represents the best practice of self-euthanasia. Maybe also as does the couple I refer to. But let me add at once that this does not mean that there is no grief, no sorrow, no pain in having to say goodbye to life and the ones you love. Especially in the case of Thomas, who had a rich life in material and immaterial respects, the decision wasn't an easy one. And as a matter of fact, I have been far more in touch with his widow's wife after his death. She couldn't have been a widow before, of course, but than before his death. And the same goes for Jan Ru's widow, Nell. People need time to come to grips with events as large and impressive as this one. So, it's becoming dangerous now. How about the law and other dangers, such as possible failure? You learn from failures. There are, well, you prefer not to have them, but once they're there, you have to face them. In the aftermath of a case of self-euthanasia in the Netherlands, the attending physician and usually the coroner aren't the real problem, but there is the law. The police, the public prosecutor, forensic experts. How trigger-happy are they? This remains as yet one of the difficulties the family and loved ones have to face as they turn from relatives into surviving relatives. At this moment, the quote-unquote unproblematic standard procedure is an investigation that takes about 2 hours or more. It means control of your home is taken over by a force of 6 to 15 officials, mostly uniformed. For someone who has just suffered an important loss, being questioned as a would-be criminal is highly unpleasant. Not to mention when you're taken down to the station for further questioning and autopsy being announced. These obstacles are mentioned under number 14. It is a part of our job as counselors to prepare our clients for events like these, just as we have to inform them of other legal issues, for instance in connection with the obtaining of the lethal medication of their choice. However, even taking this aftermath into account, my story sounds like an uncomplicated, happy one. And that raises my last question. Do things ever seriously go wrong? The individual failing to die, awaking or threatening to awake after a long, deep sleep. There's a well-known case in which I was involved as counselor where it looked as though my client indeed would not die and re-awake. The situation lasted for some 48 hours. A film has been made of this case. It seems the Dutch are in the habit of making films of this nature. This film had a happy end, however, as Paul, suffering from dementia, did, after all, die. The film was aptly named Before I Forget. This all happened in 2008, and it's a nice detail that Paul's daughter, Caroline, joined us as one of the counselors. Another case that pops up in the press every now and then is the case of a male psychiatric patient who did indeed take his lethal medication as he should, but did not die. Hospital nor psychiatric clinic were prepared to consider physician's euthanasia, and the man tragically jumped in front of a train and died. This happened in 2009. Nowadays, in 2014, in both cases, better lethal medication would undoubtedly be used. Failures are very rare indeed. As far as we can establish, they result from being found too soon by the wrong people, or not correctly following the procedure for self-euthanasia. For instance, not taking your medication securely seated in bed, but downstairs, thinking that you can still go upstairs to your bedroom, never reaching the stairs or falling off it and vomiting as a result. Or not taking an antiemetic at all. Or pausing for a moment when taking the medication and thus falling asleep before finishing it. And of course there is Murphy's Law. Recently a client of mine very carefully followed the procedure. Nothing, really nothing, was left out. But she did leave something on. A lamp that was never on during the night and now alarmed her neighbors, who, etc., etc. Ultimately, it is definitely only the client's responsibility to take this most important decision. But notwithstanding these exceptional circumstances, that I think are really exceptions, I can safely say that self-euthanasia has reached a stage where it is available as a reliable possibility next to physician's euthanasia. I would like to add to that, I am a philosopher after all, that for moral reasons, self-euthanasia may even be the option to be preferred. The difference between ending another person's life or your own is, of course, significant. But I will have to let this issue rest for today. So thank you for your attention so far, and if there are any questions, I will surely try to answer them.
Question?
Could you run the slides back to where I can see the previous one, please?
Which one would you want to
The
see?
one with the name of the drugs that were used.
Oh, the name of the drug, the name of the game.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
you just want to write it down. That's no question, you just want to see it. Okay,
Right.
okay, no problem.
I mean, you talk about self-euthanasia as though everybody knows how to do it, and very few of us do know what these reliable sources are and how reliable they are. I mean, talk about failures, we don't know whether the powder we receive is cocaine or talcum powder or Nebutal.
That's meant as a question you want me to elaborate on that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I will. Well, we work with an address in China that I mentioned, I think, yesterday. We have an address in Mexico that's too long to memorize, so I couldn't give it to you now. You can find them in Nietzsche's Peaceful Pill Handbook. The important thing is that these addresses have been tested consistently. And in the Netherlands, they have never failed. All our clients have always received what they ordered, and in the exceptional cases that they didn't receive, it was because customs intercepted the shipment. This happens very rarely, but we have to inform our clients about the possibility that it may happen. And when I say it happens very rarely, I can say that I had 2 clients in a few hundred who did not receive the medication. They reordered it with a certain discount, and then they received it after all. Does that help?
Well, yesterday you gave us the email address of what you said was a reliable source in China, and some of us took it down, some of us didn't.
Well, I prefer to refer you to the Peaceful Pill Handbook, where you find all the information.
Well, you may not know what the Peaceful Pill Handbook is.
But where am I? I mean, if you don't know the Peaceful Pill Handbook, how is this possible?
It's very
It's on the internet.
How many of you know the Peaceful Pill Handbook? And how many of you don't know what we're talking about?
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, if you go on the internet, you Google Peaceful Pill Handbook, or you Google www.peacefulpillhandbook.com, you got it.
Well, you have to pay money to get it. It says by subscription. About $85 a
Maybe
year.
I shouldn't say this because Philip Nische is certainly not going to like it, but there are a number of illegal downloads of this Peaceful Pill Handbook. You could get it for free as well. In my point of view, these problems are solved, actually.
Can you just give us the address?
I'm hesitating, because I gave it yesterday and I got all kinds of comments. So I don't know that the address in Mexico is too long to memorize. The address in China is by a certain Johnson, and then there's the number 0, and then there's msn.cn. It amazes me that you don't know, but it's very simple. The procedure is that you, whether it's a man or a woman, I really don't know, you send an email and you say, dear sir, I would like to order 25 grams of pentobarbital. That's it.
What does it cost?
At this moment, because I have no grip on that at all, at this moment 25 grams will cost you $500 American.
I think
If you want to die cheaper, you have to think of something else.
No, I mean, when we talk about self-euthanasia, whatever you call it here, self-deliverance, as Derek calls it, we usually refer to the helium method, or, of course, refusal of food and hydration. And that's really all we have access to, except illegal drugs, which we don't know about very well. So, you know, we'll excuse our ignorance.
No, but maybe I should add that importing pentobarbital in the Netherlands is illegal as well. You're not allowed even to possess it or to transport it.
So there's another risk factor.
Well, I don't know how the authorities react here. We inform our clients about the fact that they do import something that they ought not to import according to the law. At least what I explained to them is, well, you have these 2 values. The one value is obtaining the control over your life's ending. That's a high value for you. And the other value is being obedient and don't trespass the law. Now, it's your choice. If you say, I'm an obedient citizen and I don't want ever to trespass the law, well, that's your problem. We Dutch are a bit, well, let's say, we don't make a great fuss of this.
It's very interesting to me that you and Bodwin are both Dutch. Petra de Jong is sitting here as head of the most progressive, most liberal, broadest organization in the world.
Except the horizon.
Well, and so you would think once you're in the Netherlands, you have reached heaven. And why would you need an alternate organization? Petra, would you comment on, I should pass the mic down here.
Okay. Well, the Netherlands is not the Garden of Eden.
Well, that's what I'm finding out, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we agree that what we call self-euthanasia is possible, But the fact that it is illegal, that you have to obtain your medication illegally, makes it for the NVVE that we fight for a legal way to have the possibility to have a self-determination. And the legal way will be what we call the last will pill, and we are trying to get that possible through the government, and well, it will take some years, I think, before it will be there. But nowadays, I'm sure that it will be there in years.
I guess the issue is not so much what the method is who decides whether you are eligible or not. And I guess still NVVE doesn't dispense with those criteria, right?
Well, we think that's or you're not, or yes, eligible. It's just your own choice. No one is going to decide if you are eligible or not. So it's your own choice. If you want a last will pill and you want to end your life, that's your responsibility.
Now,
Okay, but
can't get more liberal than that.
you might have, I would like to add to that the chances that the Dutch government will supply this pill on this basis, that there is no test, no physician, no pharmacist between you and the pill, I think those chances are very small. It's worth trying. Don't misunderstand me. So it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
I mean, this is a very interesting question for the World Federation because we are a broad umbrella, and there are people not in this room because they're not interested in this. They want a law for terminally ill people to get medical assistance, and that's what they came here for. And then there's other people who are not interested in a law in which they have to their life and death has to be decided on by somebody else. And then there are those friends back there from the Final Exit Network that do have criteria that are much more expansive than the laws we have in the United States, that do enable people to help themselves die, but with supervision so that they don't have failed attempts. So there's all sorts of things in the middle, and it's very interesting to see the variety. Okay, questions? I'll shut up.
Next question. Okay.
I just wanted to clarify. Would all of those cases that you spoke about, that you handled, would they all qualify under the euthanasia law anyway in Holland? Did you think that there was any place where you kind of crossed the line in terms of their qualifications for assisted dying?
Okay, you refer to.
Did you hear the question?
Yes. No, I'll try to repeat it. So you refer to the examples I have given, and you would like to know if they also qualify under the euthanasia law.
Right.
Okay. Well, at least the second one I gave, that's Carol, a psychiatric patient, 50 years. Her chances would be very, 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 very slim under the law. The last case I gave, that's Thomas, who had his family with him, etc. His physician said that he could not answer the terms of the law at that stage. He had the beginning of dementia, and his physician said that he couldn't answer the law. It's possible that another physician maybe would have done so. I'm not quite sure. And the first case is Anton, who was 86, and it's more type of a completed life. And he simply decided, I don't want to burden my physician with this. It's my choice, it's my life, and I would like to be able to end it. I had a wonderful conversation with him along this line. Okay?
Rodney.
A lot of the people, I do a lot of counselling, as you do, a lot of the people who have a completed life do not have necessarily very severe pain. And they have a problem in obtaining, for example, a strong analgesic drug like oxycodone from their general practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of this process is that these drugs are pharmaceutical drugs which can be prescribed by a doctor. You don't have to go outside the country with all the difficulties of customs and cost and reliability of the drug. Have you got any advice as to how a person who wishes to end their life quite justifiably, as you indicate, can obtain strong analgesic drugs from their doctor when they...
No, I understand that. Maybe I haven't been totally clear on this point. This combination of oxycodone and flunitrazepam that was used by two clients I refer to have been obtained by a road outside the official road. So the person in question did not obtain them through his physician, but through a source that we are in contact with and that is able to obtain these medications. Bluntly spoken, it's illegal, so to speak.
Interesting, you should ask that, Dr. Syme, since you have prescribed medication for people.
But did I answer your question? Did I answer?
He's asking you.
Yes. Did I answer your question, or am I not clear?
Well,
These are medications that come from the official pharmaceutical industry, and someone is able to get hold of them. That's the best I can say.
there is a possibility for an alternative that if you have a very good friend who has got a painful condition,
Okay.
they may very well be able to obtain them genuinely and give you.
Well, these are very, very, very genuine. Don't worry about that.
No.
And you don't. What you say is possible. There all kinds of things are possible. But if you have to ask your friend or your relative, you burden them, of course, with a procedure that might be difficult for them. Some friends say yes, I don't care, I don't mind. Others say that's asking too much for you. That's an individual decision, of course. Okay? There's another question.
I have a two-part question. First of all, where do the veterinarians, the large animal veterinarians, get their supply of phenobarbital or whatever drugs they're using to put animals down?
Well, that's a question I can't answer. I'm not a veterinarian, so I don't know.
Are veterinarians in your country using powerful drugs to put animals, large animals down?
Yes.
So they're getting it from a reliable source,
Yes.
and those sources, are those sources known? Are they in the reliable pill handbook?
No, because
Because
those sources within the Netherlands will never supply them, because they would certainly get into conflict with the law. Every time they use an barbiturate, they have to write down exactly how much they use. That's
Okay.
their obligation to do.
The second part is, I've been listening to a number of programs here, and there seems to be a wide chasm between the people like yourself who are committed to the use of the chemicals and the people who are committed to the use of helium. I noticed that helium wasn't mentioned, and I was just wondering what your views were and why it wasn't.
Yes, well, that's interesting. I mean, helium works, and we have clients that use the helium method, but the number of clients that do so is very small. Probably those reasons are of an historic nature. Gas and dying on gas is not very popular in Europe, because we have a history about this. And there are a lot of people who don't like the idea of sitting next to their loved ones with a plastic bag over their head. It's their own choice. I mean, they could choose it. It's relatively easy to obtain. So if that's the choice they want to make, then it's their choice. And obviously, for those people for whom it is very, very difficult to obtain lethal medication, there is always the possibility to fall back on helium.
In your speeches, though, why not add it under number 11? Just add another line there and help
Okay, well then it's all explicitly mentioned in Bauduin's book. I had to limit myself to one procedure and the one that I have the most experience with. But it's okay.
Question back here, Tom?
Okay.
Hi, I have a couple quick questions to say from my experience with Final Exit as a senior guide. Number one, it was a sad day for me when the United States took Darvon, plain 65 milligram Darvon, off the market.
Yes,
I had a stockpile of Darvon for years. Because that initially was going to be my drug of choice. I would also add that I have had 3 cases as a senior guide. All 3 had medications. One man, large stockpile of Seconal, and had a source that was in my area in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I kept my eye on that man because he was in my Compassionate Choices group, and I figured I'd know where to get Seconal. Turns out he was the very first case I had as a guide. He chose helium, and he left me with a gigantic bottle of Seconal, which to this day is in the back of my closet. I have no interest in drugs. 2 other cases, a woman from Switzerland whose brother ended his life with powdered Nembutal, sent her the powdered Nembutal. She didn't want it, she didn't trust it, she didn't want to drink it, she used helium. And a doctor in New York still had a license, wrote a prescription for his wife, and that prescription was filled from the as they told me, the AARP online pharmacy, a 3-month supply, quite adequate. He never used it and used helium. So again, there's all of this out here. It's personal.
What's your question?
This is not a chasm. I mean, this is just a discussion of choice as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
That was
Question. There's a question here. There's a question here in front.
This isn't actually a question, but an
No, it's not a question, it's an observation, but you
Observation, okay.
recommended,
I'll go for
if
that.
I understood you, to ask friends for their pain medications. It is, at least in the U.S., I believe, a felony for a person to give, sell, or otherwise transfer their medications prescribed for them to any other party.
Well,
Not that people wouldn't be willing to do it.
Okay, if that bothers you, you shouldn't do it. But
No. It's about protecting the other parties. One of the criteria that was discussed earlier was not presenting harm to other people. It's just something to be aware of.
Okay, no, it's all these decisions are individuals' decisions. That's very important to remember. There's a
Another
question at the
concern I
back.
have, Tom, is are we concerned about suicide prevention? And is this suicide? And where do you draw the line? And who makes these judgments about justifiable or not? If I may hog the microphone for a second.
No. That's why I introduced, at least I followed Bauduin, but I expanded the definition of self-euthanasia. It's not self-euthanasia, it's self-euthanasia. It has a moral component. It's a good death. And part of this good death is, of course, that you have discussed this with your loved ones, that you have thought about it, that you have looked at other options, and that might be another solution to the problem that forces you maybe to end your life. Obviously, if there is another solution, less drastic, I would suggest take it. But if it is your choice to definitely end your life, I can't bind you and say you're not allowed on my account to do it.
We're pretty sure it'd be highly scandalous if Robin Williams died with a plastic bag on his head and a helium tank in his room. But the way he died, nobody really commented on it, but it was a pretty horrible way to go. So we're not really well educated in our country.
There's a question in the back. Thing. Well, okay.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I think I've heard that people who are in hospice.
Okay, I'm sure that for many, many years, doctors who had a good relationship with their patients were willing to give them drugs in doses over time that they could stockpile and use. My question is there a doctor in the room who's willing to tell us how many months in advance or years in advance they would need to start in order to accumulate enough of that stockpile?
My information, no, but even if you get a prescription for second or Nebutin from the doctor, you can't get it filled.
No, well,
Does anybody else have, Dick? Oxycodone, there we go. Dick McDonald?
As to medication, it is readily available as far as Seconal, but Nembutal by capsule is not available anymore. And we've had experience, as was mentioned before, of someone requesting sleeping medication. And we have them informed so they know to ask for it in a way that their physician may supply it. And that is that the usual meds today are just tranquilizers, not hypnotic, true sedatives. And so they must say that they have tried all the various new medications, and they don't help the way Seconal used to help 30 years ago, and they're going on a trip, and they always have problems sleeping, so could they have a prescription? Now, as far as having to accumulate it, some physicians will prescribe, I'll tell you most right now, especially younger physicians, have never prescribed it. So you might be better to go to a gray-haired physician for that. But some will prescribe 15 or 20, a few 30. And if you are getting your medication from online pharmacy, tell the doctor that if they prescribe them for a month, but that you really have a 3-month supply available to you from your online pharmacy, because they wish to sell you 3 months at a time. And we have actually had, in the past year, someone obtain 90 capsules of Seconal from either a knowing physician or an unknowing physician. So it is available. Pharmacists might tell the patient, oh no, they don't have that available, because many pharmacists don't know that it is still available. And you just have to inform them that, well, your doctor told you that it is available through the pharmaceutical supply houses. And there was a question about the veterinary medication and where that comes from. Well, veterinary doctors get it through a pharmaceutical veterinary wholesale or warehouse. And we have had people get it through either the supplying house or through veterinary practitioners in various locations, but certainly Mexico, it is still available, as some people in this room have proven quite recently.
Maybe I would like to add to this that of course it depends on which medication you want to use as lethal medication. If you want to use chloroquine, you will have to check the quantity that you need. If you use Seconal, you have to check the quantity that you need. If you use Nembutal, you have to check the quantity that you need. If you use sleeping aids, then you have to check the quantity that you need. I mean, it's your own responsibility to take care that when you do this on a reliable way, of course. Okay.
I have a question about morphine. I thought I had heard people say that they were in hospice and they were given morphine, and then the hospice aide said, but if I give you more, it would be lethal. And that was fine, because that was their choice. Can you comment on the use of morphine?
Yes, well, the easy way would be to refer you to Boudewijn's book, but morphine is also possible, and you need a quantity of over 1 gram, if I'm correct, of morphine, but you need to make a combination with sleeping aid, a long-working sleeping aid. It's kind of what used to be the dextropropoxyphene, the Darvon, that was mentioned, and instead of Darvon you might use morphine. Yes.
Depends on your tolerance, though. How much?
Surely.
Yeah.
All these things, it always depends on your tolerance. That's the great advantage of pentobarbital, of course, that it is so strong that it gets over all the other medication. That's very important.
I'm volunteering a word here from Neil Nickel, who used to be Dr. Kevorkian's right-hand person.
Something that some people may not realize is that most times when they restrict you to 1 month supply of a drug, it's not because you can't have 3 months supply of the drug, it's because your insurance company wants you to buy 1 month supplies, that way they get their copay every month. If you tell the pharmacist that you're going naked and you don't have a pharmaceutical insurance program, they'll be more than happy to sell you a 3-month supply. For your information.
Questions over here?
Yes. Can you briefly describe what you do as a counselor, and are there any costs to the people you counsel?
Okay.
Everybody hear that? What he described, what he does as a counselor?
Well, the last part of your question is the easy part. I charge 90 euros. That would be $110. I'm not quite sure. For a consultation that takes 1.5 hours. In those 1.5 hours, people can get all the information they need, probably, unless it's a complicated situation, let's say a psychiatric patient, which requires more conversations in order to make sure that the family is informed and that maybe loved ones are prepared to join in and to have their say in this. So it's very difficult to make a general statement about the content of this consultation. That depends on the individual that I meet with. Let's say the case of Thomas, who had his diagnosis of beginning dementia, was not very complicated for me. It was complicated for him, and it was complicated for his family. On the other hand, someone like Carol, who was a psychiatric patient, is more complicated for me. But please be sure I am not the one to judge if I'm giving the information or not. I just want to make sure that I'm kind of a mirror for the person who's talking to me. Are you quite sure that this is what you want? And that's one of the things why I'm so pleased with an antiemetic. You use it 24 hours before you end your life. That means that 24 hours you are confronted with the fact that you are going to end your life. And in those 24 hours you can always stop the procedure. I hope this answers your question, because I can't go in. It's an individual consultation.
Somebody had a question?
I would be interested to hear more about your organization and your profession as end-of-life counselor, and if you've had any suggestions for how to find somebody in that profession locally. Is there a referral system? Who is your organization, and how many other people are there?
The organization is it's the Horizon. In Dutch it's the Engel. That's as yet only in Dutch. I'm pressed to publish in English, and I will do so, but that will take some time. I have, maybe that's interesting for you, very incidentally, I have a client from the United States. I have been, I'm not a very technical person, but incidentally I use my wife's laptop, and then I have, what do you call it, a conversation on Skype. That's not very private in my point of view, so I always say when it comes tricky, then we have to do this either by telephone or by normal mail. There are people contact us from all kinds of countries in Europe. So.
Dr. Edwards.
Talking about saving things and collecting things, they're all going to North Carolina shortly as requested. So if you wanted one bag, if you give me your card, I'll mail one and steal it from North Carolina. Sorry about that.
Well,
are these Charlotte's bags, or whose bags are these?
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting suggestion. I have to deny your offer, but that's interesting because in the Netherlands it is certainly impossible for me to accept one of your bags and to present it to one of my clients. That would bring me possibly in severe problems.
You know, we had sources of very nice plastic bags at one time.
We had
They're all stopped. So, any other comments, questions for Tom?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think I've heard a couple of different points of view from you regarding the cooperation of the family. Relative to whether or not it's part of a good death.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you advise, or how do you get involved if the family is uncooperative?
It's difficult to give a general answer, of course. I mean, I prefer either the family or another trusted person to be involved and to listen in on the conversation. But obviously it is possible, like actually the case of Anton, who was really living alone, and there are a lot of people who say this is my life, it's my decision, and I don't want to burden anybody else with it. I always ask after their family, are there any brothers, sisters still living? Are your parents dead or are they still alive? Because after you're gone, they have to continue living with the fact that you have ended your life. And I think it's a kind of a moral responsibility to take that into account. But I cannot force anyone to do anything in that respect. But it is certainly part of my consultation, always.
I see John Abrams.
Well, I have an answer to that question.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't get around to that.
I have an answer to your question. It's I do training on this kind of thing, and this may not sound very compassionate, but in this country, doctors are scared to death of litigation. And if you have a family member who you know disagrees with your wishes, I wish I had something better to tell you, but my unequivocal advice is, if you know they disagree, you don't even tell them. You know, you invite them to the funeral, that's it. I mean, you don't even tell them you're going in the hospital. It can be extremely problematic. Sorry, that's the only solution I've found in the last several years.
My question is, do you ever decide that someone's not appropriate for your services? Even though they have decided that they genuinely want to die, do you ever decide, I can't work with that person?
Okay. Well, basically it's not something that I decide, but it's something that comes up during the consultation. I mean, if I have a client, and I have one in mind now, whose dementia has progressed so far that he is not really capable to understand what I am actually saying, and not really capable to make all the steps that he should make, then I cannot help him. I've also had a psychiatric patient who came to me together with her parents, but during the consultation she slipped into a psychosis. Well, that's the end of the story, of course. So it's not something that before the consultation they have to pass a kind of exam, but during the consultation it's always possible that I find out that then they will not be capable to do the things that they have to do. So they have to be mentally competent, but in general also physically to do the things that they have to do.
I'm going to end this presentation now